Hey y'all, welcome back to Life with Lachey. Today I thought I would come on and give a quick video about interviews for PhD programs because it is interview season and I am getting these questions a lot about what interviews were like, what to do on interviews, what to expect. So I thought I'd come on and give my perspective of the experience I had, keeping in mind that I did not apply in the middle of a global pandemic, so the format will probably look a lot different if you are someone who just applied this cycle. But I feel like in general, interviews were like this big daunting thing. I was extremely anxious about them, extremely nervous. And it turned out to like not be as bad, nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be in my head. So I think one of the biggest things is just like to relax and be yourself. At the point that you have an interview, the program has already looked at like your resume and all your materials, and they obviously like something they see. So it's more so, in my opinion, about filling out your personality and determining if you're going to be a good fit for that program, which in itself, I don't know, it can be a little stressful and also a teeny bit problematic, but that's another video for another day. So I will start by talking about the prep period. So when interviews were coming up, I was like super nervous about everything, like clothes, like how should I wear my hair, like what should I say. So I actually had mock interviews with some of the faculty at the university that I worked at the time. And so the mock interviews were really just to prepare me, to have me like rehearse some of the things, the common questions that are asked. And one of the biggest takeaways that I got from mock interviews was to rehearse your introduction. I feel like in my head leading up to interviews, I was like so worried about being able to articulate my research in a way that, you know, really made sense and translated the passion that I have for it. But then and I was like, I don't need to practice my introduction because I know who I am. I can talk about myself. Except when I got to that mock interview and the faculty was like, so tell me about yourself. And I was like, well, I'm Lachey, and so you really want to like be polished. Like, you don't need a script per se, but you definitely want to have like the language that you're gonna use. Just like keep in mind, like, don't undersell yourself, like definitely talk yourself up and just be yourself. There's so many like little things that you would think people know, but they don't know. And I can say this as someone who has now been in a program for 2 years, and I've seen applicants come through, and I can remember from my interviews, like different things that I saw. So the first thing is like appearance. Okay. So this applies to both in-person and Zoom. I actually, when I applied, I said before in another video, I had 4 interviews. I actually had like 4.5. So one program that I applied to, I had a virtual pre-interview before the real interview. And that was like, and it was like, I think the week of Christmas or a couple days before Christmas, I had like a virtual interview with this program. And it was specifically with the PI that I was applying to, because I think she just had too many and she was trying to narrow them down for real interviews. So I had a virtual meeting with her, and then the rest of them were all in person, including her after she met with me virtually. So you want to dress like, I know people, I just said like show your personality, and so some people will take that to heart and like go find the flyest suit that they can find that has all these colors and bold patterns and like really trying to make a fashion statement. This is not the time for that. Like, save that suit for some fly presentation that you have to give. Interviews is not the time to make a bold fashion statement, okay? So go like classic navy, classic black, classic grays, and make sure that you wear a suit. This is like obviously more important when you're in person than it is virtual, because in theory you could just like wear pajama bottoms, but you probably shouldn't do that in case something happens and you need to stand up. So definitely like come dressed to the nines with like professional attire on. You definitely want to, like, ladies, don't go crazy on makeup, like keep it real neutral. I personally only know one makeup look. You may have noticed by now. This is it. This is all I can do. So this is also the face that I had on for interviews. But just keep it simple, like don't overdo it. Different programs have different setups for interviews, but there's a couple ways you can do it. For the programs that have longer interview weekends, this is usually how it goes. There's usually some kind of first night social type of setting. So that's either like, at one program, it was at a faculty member's house, like everyone came over and there was catered food. At another program, it was on the university's campus, there was like catered food and like a mixer, right? And that mixer didn't have faculty, actually. It only had grad students to kind of fill you out and for you to meet other applicants. Then there was another program that had a social dinner as soon as you arrived as well. So usually there is, unless it's on the shorter end of interview weekends, most programs have some kind of social event leading into. And then the next morning you wake up bright and early and you go to like real interviews. So like the first piece, there's usually some kind of welcome introduction that might be like an hour or a little longer. And they talk to you about the program. They talk about some of the stuff that's like on handbooks that you might find on a program's website. So things about like curriculum, money, timing that they expect you to be in the program, different faculty and faculty's research, different philosophies on collaboration, like all that type of stuff. I think that is an area where you want to have questions written down. You don't have to like fire off questions, but if you genuinely have questions, like don't be afraid to ask them. I know for me, I had questions about like grant writing, like will we get, some type of experience with grant writing, like what type of statistics support is offered? Do you have like a stats person in the department, or like how many stats courses are you offering? Because I felt like that was really important to have the support that I needed to be a good scientist. And then I also ask questions about money. Sometimes people are afraid to ask about money. And if that's you, no judgment from me. However, you need to figure out how you're going to be living. So don't be afraid to ask the questions about money, how these things are funded, where's the funding coming from, if it's not clear. Like one program I went to, only one out of the 4 interviews I had, it was unclear if my funding was going to come from a RA-ship or a TA-ship. And to some people, right, that might not make a big difference, but I have a whole nother video that I'm going to post in like a week to explain to you why it matters. And so like that ambiguity was a red flag to me. Like, why don't you know where my funding is coming from? I need to know this up front. So I asked those kinds of questions. I asked, how many years was your funding guaranteed? Some programs I recommend, you don't have to be as neurotic as me, but if the program has a handbook, I recommend reading through that handbook so that you can sort of it'll flag the questions. Like I know for the program I'm at, they used to have this rule about like something about when, there's only a certain amount of years they fund you. And then when you go on internship, there are like a certain number of credits that you have to remain enrolled for, and you're responsible for those credits. And so I wanted to know, okay, who's paying for this? Are we supposed to take out loans to pay for this? And so I asked that question, and I'm pretty sure they were like, oh yeah, that's not a thing anymore. We need to update the handbook. So ask the questions, because those things do matter, and you want to be in a place where you can focus on your studies and not be stressed out about any of the logistical things. Okay, cool. So after the morning meeting, then there's usually interviews, right? So a lot of programs kind of hold you in some like holding space if you were in person, and then you have a schedule. They give you a schedule at the beginning of the day. Like say you're going to meet with 3 to 5 faculty members. They will give you the times and who you're meeting with and what room they're in. Now some programs will have grad students like walk you to those rooms, and some will just expect you to figure it out, and it's usually not that hard. I would imagine for a Zoom setup, assuming your interviews are on Zoom, that there's going to be either some type of breakout room situation or some type of Zoom link situation where they can put you in a waiting room. Like, I feel like the setup's going to be the same. It just won't be in person. And so anyway, you go around and you meet these different faculty. So what do you talk about in interviews, right? When you get to an interview, they already know the stuff they need to know about you. They already know what your grades were, what your GRE scores were, what your research was that's on your CV. They know those things. You wrote a personal statement. I would say the most important things to keep in mind are, if you put like papers or posters or anything like that on your CV, be prepared to talk about them, and not just like, oh, I worked on this. Like, be prepared to say what your role was, what the research was about, what the findings were. Not that they're going to drill you on it, but you want to be prepared. Obviously, you want to be prepared by knowing information about that PI or that faculty member that you're interviewing with. And so if sometimes, most programs do give you a itinerary of who you're meeting with before. There were some programs that either gave it to you once you got there, or like, I don't know, in that morning meeting. Google them real quick and see like what their deal is, so you can find something to connect on. It's a really good idea in general, especially if you want to be a PhD student, to be like read up on some of the current literature in the field, so you can have some talking points that relate to your research and what you're interested in, and how to connect that to the PI's research, so you can just make them feel so awesome and amazing about how interesting their work is. But above and beyond all that, be yourself. Like, that is the biggest piece of advice. Don't try to mask who you are. Because I mean, obviously you want to be professional, but I think you are also interviewing these people. They're not just interviewing you. You also should be assessing fit every step of the way. And so if you get an inkling or a gut feeling that you're not going to work well with someone, that your personalities are not a fit, or the mentorship style is not a fit, follow that gut instinct. You should be filling out their personalities. You should be asking about their mentorship style, right? Like, some people, I know actually quite a few people who like for their mentors to almost like micromanage them a little bit, to have a lot of oversight, to sort of frequently be checking in on like how things are going, and giving them tasks to do, right? That's not my style. My style is a little more, I don't want to say hands off, but that's kind of my mentor's mentorship style, is like we discuss about the things that I'm working on, and she expects me to do them. Like, there's not a lot of micromanaging. Of course, like if I'm doing something that requires like oversight and to be checked, I keep a very good track and records of that, so she can overlook and oversee and make sure I'm doing everything correctly. But I think in general, like, we have a really nice style that fits each other, and so that's not an issue. It doesn't cause any tension. So the other thing you want to talk about in interviews is projects. So the reason you want to do all this research on the PIs, presumably you've already done it, but you want to do research specifically for the person whose lab you're interviewing to be in, because you want to know, like, you want to know what project you're going to be working on, like what your time is going to be like. Now, for me, right, in full disclosure, I was at the time hoping to just get into one program. And so if I got into one program and it was not like on my dream project, I would have been okay and I would have done just fine. But it matters when it comes down to having options and choosing between places. You want to think about if you're going to be the most happy, or have the most access to data, or all those types of things that impact what kind of research you can do, how often you might be able to publish, what kind of support you're going to have to be able to write manuscripts, what kind of support you're going to have to be able to write grants, how much funding is the grant that your PI has if you're going to be on a research assistantship, how many years is left in that funding, are you going to have to find funding midway through your program, all those types of important questions you want to think about. And so for me, I thought about heavily and asked also, like, what specific project do you see me, or do you see the PhD student you accept working on? And so for some faculty, like my mentor, for example, has multiple projects. And so she kind of gave us a little bit of flexibility and said, well, here's some options. Like, what do you think you would want to do? For PIs that might not have multiple projects, they've got one, like, they might have a very clear idea of what they need and what they expect their PhD student to do. So ask that, because you want to know what your time is going to look like, right? Like, some PIs take PhD students and sort of expect them to fill the role of like what a research coordinator might do, like sort of run the study in that way. Some PIs don't expect that. They just expect some other type of support, like maybe they want you to be a study therapist, or a study junior clinician, or they might expect you to just run data, or, like different expectations are there. So I would ask, like, what do you see what project do you see me working on if I were to come here? So I think that's really important. So then once you make it through, those are the key things that you should be asking faculty throughout the day, just talking, getting to know them. And then after you make it through that, usually there is some other kind of like social happy hour type of situation with students again, usually. And oftentimes this is the mixer that's only with grad students. So I would imagine for a virtual format, because I know this is, I think, how my program is going to do it. There probably will be some kind of virtual happy hour with students. So think about questions that you have that pertain to students. Like, I know some of the questions I've gotten recently is like, how is it living on the stipend? What is the environment like? Is it collaborative? Are people kind? Is it competitive? How competitive is it? People ask all kinds of questions about the city life, the housing in the city, all those types of things that you want to know for a place you're going to move to. Ask those questions. I know for me, I had questions about housing, about work-life balance, which I think is not great anywhere you go. Honestly, it's just my opinion. But some programs I had the sense had worse work-life balance than others. And so I took that into consideration when I was making my decision. And finally, if this is a long interview weekend, which I'm imagining won't happen over Zoom, but just in case you're applying next year or something, and they go back to being in person, oftentimes that last day, like a Sunday, for example, they will have some kind of like brunch that might be paid for, may or may not, depends on how much money the school has, might have some type of brunch or some type of city tour where grad students will take you out to places and like have you get a feel for the city, or it might just be like you go do that on your own. So if you're in person, this is what I would say for if you're in person next year or the year after that or something. Interviews are expensive to travel to, so you want to think about setting yourself up in a couple ways. Like keep in mind like what's the cheapest way to get there, but also if you've never been to the city and you need to get a feel for it, like take that time if you can afford to do so. So for me, most of my interviews were in the Southeast. One of them was up north where I am now in Philly. But I was not living at home in Atlanta. I was living in Miami. And so my interviews that were in anywhere in the Southeast, they were in small cities. So it would have costed me like $400 to fly into these places, right? I was not, me personally, I don't know about y'all's pockets. This is me personally. I was not going to pay $400 for every flight into these small regional airports. I just wasn't going to do it. And it didn't make sense to do. So I flew into Atlanta, which is home, and then drove to these places that were in the Southeast. And the reason I did that was for two reasons. Number one, it was cheaper. I could get round trip flights for $100 or less from Miami to Atlanta. And I knew if I rented a car, it would cost me like $30. But luckily I didn't have to rent one because they had just bought my little brother a brand new car. So I just took his car because he didn't know how to drive yet. So I just took his car on the road and drove to these places that were 2 or 3 hours away, sometimes a little less than 2 even. And so that's what I did. And that did two things for me. I don't know what your setup was, but I was living alone in Miami at the time, and I was planning a wedding long distance in Atlanta. So what that did for me was it gave me a pit stop to be loved on by my family. They would take me to brunch and like, cheer me on. My fiance was there. He would cheer me on. And then I'd be like, all right, I'm ready to go do it. And then I would drive and do it. And so that worked for me. I don't know what will work for you. The other thing I will say is like oftentimes when you're in person, you will stay with someone. Not all programs do this, but a lot of them will have grad students offer to host. We hosted someone last year during interview season because we had the room to do so. And I was hosted, and because I was hosted by students on my interview trail at every school that I went to except for one, which is the school I'm at. I was not offered to be hosted here, but I didn't care because my best friend lives like literally up the street from me. So I went to her house and we picked out bridesmaid dresses and it was great. But most of the programs will offer for students to host you. So keep that in mind. If you want to get to a program early, don't ask students to like host you for an extra long time. Like get a hotel or Airbnb or something if you plan on coming early or staying late beyond interview weekend. Because students are really just doing it. We're really poor and we just doing it out the kindness of our hearts. So those are the major tips for interview weekend. Give them a chance to reach out to you after interviews. If you have more questions that you didn't think of during interviews, you can reach out to them in email. All the questions that you have, just get them out, because you don't want to be in a situation where you want to be grateful for every offer you get, or any offer you get. If you get one offer, that's great. You just need one. But you don't want to be in a mindset of desperation where you think only a program, you know, I would die to go to this program, versus a program would be lucky to have you, because it works both ways. You will be getting things from the program because they're going to be funding you, but the program will also be getting their money's worth from you as well. So think about those things. Make sure you have all the questions answered that you need answered, whether you do it in big meetings, one-on-one settings, reaching out to people via email. Just get those questions answered. And above all, relax. It's not nearly as bad as you think it's going to be. Most of these people in these places are extremely friendly. On my interview trail, meeting with like 5 faculty at each school, I can honestly say I only met with one faculty member who made me uncomfortable, and not even in like an inappropriate way. Just, I was like, probably don't want to have to work with you type of way. It was just kind of like the entire conversation was strange, and I actually wasn't interviewed. He just talked about himself for 30 minutes while I sat there and listened. So that type of stuff you want to look out for, but most of the time people are completely normal and nice and friendly, and you will do great. So just relax, do your best, be yourself, put on a nice suit, not a purple one, and just rock out. And good luck on your interviews if you have interviews this year. If you don't, best luck applying in the future. If you made it this far, I'm assuming that you're very dedicated to applying in the future. So best of luck with your applications. And I have a video coming soon about funding mechanisms, because I feel like these two things go neck and neck, and you should probably watch that too to know how to tailor those funding questions for interviews. But hopefully, I just wanted to get this out before anyone has an interview, since folks have been asking. So I hope that was informative for you. Let me know what you want to hear about next in the process. If you need to hear about, like, once you get offers, what to do, how to negotiate, let me know. I'm happy to talk about any part of the process that would be helpful for you to hear. And I hope you guys have a great holiday season. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.